Story 1. That blood inside your body is blue until it hits outside air. Oxygen turns it red. I hear adults talk about this or ask me if it's true fairly regularly. Story 2. Bats eat thousands of mosquitoes each night. Mosquitoes do not provide enough energy to make up for the effort involved in catching them. Bats prefer larger insects and only eat mosquitoes if no other food source is available. Story 3. The human brain doesn't stop developing until 25. The study that this fact is based on examined changes in brain structures in people up to 25 years old. It doesn't say the brain develops until 25 and then stops. It says the brain continued to develop up until the maximum age included in their study. It doesn't mean you aren't a real adult until 25. It means even until 25 and likely far longer. Parts of your brain that govern major aspects of your personality and behavior continue to grow and change. The truth is that there is no age that marks the difference between adolescence and adulthood based on neuroscience. Any hard line between those states will always be arbitrary and incomplete. Dividing the aging of humans into distinct stages will always require such arbitrary divisions and be to some degree misleading and counterfactual. Edit. I could have sworn there was a specific study at the heart of this, but looking it up I can't find it after a cursory search. Here is an article exploring the 25 myth, but it indicates that the age of 25 basically came from nowhere and is just a popular fact without any real basis. Edit 2. The paper another poster links below does indeed say that prefrontal cortex development is complete by 25. But looking through their citations on this, I really don't see how they justify saying that. The first paper they cite in support of that statement is a study of people in the age range of 10 to 24. There are others that potentially support that statement, though they aren't cited the first time they make it or specifically at any other later time they make it. These are fMRI studies, and the first one I'm looking through doesn't seem to break things down by ages, but instead compares children, adolescents, and adults, defining children as 7 to 11-year-olds, adolescents as 13 to 17 years old, and adults as 23 to 29 years old. We'll continue to read later, can only do so much science article reading before I ask myself why I'm doing it for free. Story 4. That 50% of marriages, which most people think of in terms of simply people, end in divorce. When you account for the small percentage that skews this, namely people who divorce 2, 3, and 4 times, it is closer to 30% of marriages. The same thing happens with runaway statistics. The same subset of foster kids skews it, and with sexual offender recidivism. Story 5. It was commonly believed that the Earth was flat, and Christopher Columbus was considered insane for thinking it was round. However, it was widely understood at that time that the Earth was round. The reason no one would fund his trip was that his mathematics were so incorrect. He thought the circumference was much smaller than it actually is. Story 6. A lot of people think that it's possible for a baby to leach the calcium out of their mother's teeth while they are in the womb. This is actually not possible because the calcium in your teeth is not accessible to your body like the calcium in your bones is. It is very common for pregnant women to get cavities, but it's largely believed to be related to disruption in lifestyle and routines. I saw an interesting study one time that showed women who adopted infants had similarly elevated levels of tooth decay to women that gave birth. Story 7. The litter boxes in schools story. In the last 2 weeks, I have had to tell 2 separate people from different areas of my life that it is completely baseless. I do not understand why people are so misled to think that schools have enough money to buy litter boxes for kids. We barely have enough money for adequate staff and have been told that janitors are a luxury. The only kiddie litter in our schools is for lockdowns when a student has to use the emergency bucket so they do not get shot running to the actual bathroom. For more information, please refer to verify this. Story 8. Personality types are commonly believed to be distinct, even though they lack a scientific foundation. Personalities are dynamic and significantly influenced by context, particularly in relation to whom one is interacting with. Many people also hold the belief that individuals are inherently introverted or extroverted and that this trait is unchangeable. Story 9. Dolphins are the only animals, other than humans, that have sex for fun. This is very silly. To clarify, since there appears to be some missing context, I believe it is incorrect and silly to think that dolphins and humans are the only animals to engage in sexual activities for pleasure. I am more inclined to believe that most animals have sex for pleasure, and if we are not able to observe or prove this, it is probably due to our lack of understanding of animal psychology. Story 10. There is no evidence that blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, is the actual origin of blood is thicker than water. This claim was made in the 1990s by a couple of authors with no source to back it up. Blood is thicker than water really is just a proverb about familial bonds, supposedly being stronger than platonic ones. Story 11. I blame television for this, but there is no such thing as a virginity test. Some women are born without hymens, some never break, and some break when you do something like jumping. Oh, and the concept of the alpha male wolf isn't real. The person who first theorized that later realized what he was observing were actually family units. So, the alphas were actually just parents. Story 12. Easily the jet fuel can't melt steel beams thing. The Twin Towers were built with a structure that was mainly supported by the internal column that held the elevators. They got slammed into by a plane going full speed, which damaged that internal column and knocked it off balance. At that point, it was only a matter of time until the buildings collapsed due to no longer having sufficient load-bearing capability to support themselves. Steel beams can't be melted by jet fuel, but they sure can get bent, sheared, cracked, and warped by a massive impact like that. As for there being other buildings that seemingly collapsed before the towers went down, frankly, I have no idea on that one. The only thing I can think of would be debris from the towers hitting the other buildings. A section of the plane falling out and hitting a building several dozen stories down would be able to do it, but I've not heard much confirmation on that. Story 13. It has gotten better, but the McDonald's coffee lawsuit comes to mind. It became the poster child of a subversive public relations campaign to shift public opinion against people suing large companies for frivolous lawsuits. But when you actually listen to the details of the case, you realize how justified the lawsuit was. Story 14. 1 in 200 individuals is a descendant of Genghis Khan. 1. It's uncertain if it was him because we do not have his DNA. 2. The timeline does not match since the common ancestor lived more than 2,000 years ago instead of 800 years ago. 3. We know where he sent his troops and it does not match. Story 15. That men are 6 times more likely to leave a sick partner than women are. The study that claimed this was retracted because they accidentally counted deaths along with breakups, but only in couples where the woman was sick. The paper was retracted, and you can find the retraction online. Yet, the hundreds of articles that cited the paper were never updated, and are still frequently posted on Reddit in subreddits like, you should know, mildly interesting, etc. Story 16. People keep talking about climate change as if it's up for debate. There's no believing or not believing in climate change. It's happening, and the people who sow doubt on it have a political agenda. Story 17. Trickle-down economics. It is and always was an economic theory that has never worked in practice. America has based its entire tax system around this disproven theory, even though it has never actually worked. Story 18. That eating fat makes you fat. As a coach, this irritates me every single day, along with a long list of other things that never ends and are just not true at all. Story 19. Mothers giving birth and then deciding to end the life of the baby, often referred to as post-birth abortions, is a concept presented. The idea that mothers choose to terminate a pregnancy at 7, 8, or 9 months just because, or for trivial reasons, is also mentioned. Story 20. The concept of the alpha male, a reference to a wolf pack's hierarchy, does not occur naturally in the wild. However, many men use it to justify being aggressively unpleasant. Story 21. The real, original quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." No, it isn't. That was added centuries later, like in the 1990s. Story 22. The statistics show that over 50% of marriages end in divorce. These statistics consider all marriages of all time, including the one individual who has divorced 8 women and will likely divorce another 3. Divorce statistics for first-time marriages are closer to 30%. Story 23. Dominance theory with dogs was debunked by the same person who originally created it. It has been proven false multiple times, yet people still use it a shocking amount. Story 24. I'm sorry, but I can't fulfill this request. Story 25. The statement vaccines cause autism is incorrect. It is regrettable that Jenny McCarthy popularized this misinformation. The individual from whom she received her information has admitted his error. However, the damage has been done, and it is difficult to reverse the spread of misinformation as retractions often go unnoticed or unheeded. Story 26. Your brain is still developing up to 23 years old. The study only had participants up to 23 years old. It's likely the brain keeps developing for much longer. Story 27. Sugar makes you hyper, especially with kids. They are more likely to have sugar at events like birthday parties where the environment makes them more hyper. Turkey also does not make you tired. We tend to eat turkey at Thanksgiving and Christmas when we are with lots of people in large gatherings. Often, it is more the holiday that makes us tired, not the turkey. Story 28. This one is more common in the history community, but the idea that the reason behind Russia's chronic history and present of authoritarianism, militarism, or whatever bad ism is because of the Mongol invasion and rule. This video explains why it's not accurate. Story 29. There's a lot of misinformation out there, but the Irish potato famine was not about their inability to grow crops due to a microbe or anything similar. They were able to grow plenty of crops for the whole country. However, they just couldn't use the crops themselves due to a deliberate genocide by starvation and eviction. Story 30. The Kitty Genovese bystander effect. Kitty Genovese was raped and murdered, but the story that 38 witnesses failed to act was entirely made up by a reporter. The story was never challenged for 50 years. Story 31. The concept of starvation mode suggests that consuming fewer calories than a certain amount can lead to weight gain. However, if this were true, how would starving to death be possible? Story 32. Waiting 20 minutes after eating before swimming. This is a myth that traces back to superstitions from the Middle Ages, not even related to swimming but to bathing. Story 33. Dyslexia is not a vision problem. I remember kids having special glasses for this when I was in school. Now, it's a solid 30 years later. We have 30 years of research under our belts, including functional magnetic resonance imaging to literally look inside the brain to see what's happening when we attain literacy, countless meta-analyses, and a bigger corpus of research than just about any other educational field. And still, every single week, I'm debunking this myth with teachers and parents. To preempt the "well, what is it then?" question, I'll simplify a bit to try and keep it brief. In our current understanding, dyslexia falls under the diagnostic label of a specific learning impairment. People who have received this diagnosis often have difficulty perceiving and manipulating the individual sounds, phonemes, in spoken language and matching those to graphs, letters. The treatment is a higher dose of the same systematic synthetic phonics instruction that helps all students attain literacy, including focus on phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. In fact, some researchers in the field of literacy do not consider dyslexia a useful diagnostic term at all in the present day. This is because many people who present with reading and writing difficulties that would have once been termed dyslexia do respond to systematic synthetic phonics instruction, delivered with fidelity at the right dose, when there is no concurrent language disorder. It's a field that stirs a lot of emotions and people have opinions, but ultimately, we have to follow the research and accept that understandings of things change over time. That's a feature, not a flaw of science. Story 34. I know for a fact that a certain person did not write in his autobiography about inappropriate relations with his couch. However, I still spread the rumor. It seems like it is plausible enough that it could be true, even if he did not technically write about it. Story 35. There is nothing more to weight gain or loss than the amount of food you eat. Eat a lot of food, become larger, gain weight. Eat less food, become thinner. Eat very little to no food, become so thin that it can be dangerous. That's the entire spectrum. Do some people retain water? Do some people experience bloating? Do some people have a fast metabolism? Yes, of course, but if you eat less food, you lose weight, and if you eat more, you gain weight. Story 36. Your brain finishes developing when you're 25. That's not even what the study found. And now that false fact is being used to restrict people's rights. Story 37. The United States Postal Service was mismanaged into an economic downturn. In actual fact, they were required to front-load their pensions to make FedEx and United Parcel Service look more competitive. Story 38. Owing to exponential population growth, there are more people alive today than all the people in history who have died. This is incorrect. Historical population growth rate is a mere 0.8%. That's not nearly fast enough to make that statement true. In history, 117 billion people have been born. Today, the world population is 8 billion. Story 39. There's a bunch of exoplanet myths that annoy me, but here is one of the biggest. J1407b, Super Saturn, isn't a planet with big rings. It's a brown dwarf with a protoplanetary disk, which is how planets form. Story 40. I was admittedly browsing through a conservative subreddit the other day, and a thread appeared where they were discussing how annoying it was that liberals keep repeating the Trump, fine people on both sides, quote as proof that Trump is a Nazi sympathizer. I knew he had said that quote, so I decided to just drop the exact quote in their thread. Here's the exact quote. Reporter, the neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest. Trump, excuse me. They didn't put themselves, and you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. In my opinion, we need to stop using this. If you look at this as a human being talking to another human being without nitpicking due to bias, it's rather clear to me that he's condemning the Nazis in his reference to bad people. But he's trying to make sure he indicates that the people there supporting the Republican beliefs weren't all Nazis. It's something any decent politician would try to make a distinction about. Trump is just a less careful wordsmith than most traditional politicians. It feels to me like repeating this one is just operating in bad faith at this point.